Thanks a lot, Bevan, and thank you to you all for having me here today. We've just heard from Steve about how things are changing and how the future is uncertain. And so what I'm going to talk about is really how do we work in those situations and what I've learned working with startups who are very comfortable working in that environment. So this is the journey that we're going to go on together today. We're going to talk about the unbelievable pace of change. I think we all know that, but I want you to feel it, and I want you to understand some of the things that are causing it. I'm then going to talk about how startups work, which is the world that I know really well, and how this is a normal state for startups and how we can learn a lot from how they work when we're making new businesses in companies like Horizon. I'm going to talk about how learning velocity is a very important factor here, how learning becomes a vital currency for how we work as companies of the future, and how curious people are a really important part of that equation. So here's a bit more on Pollenizer, and of course one of the companies that we're working with is Horizon itself, and we're helping Horizon to actually find some of the more disruptive things that it might be making in the future using this way of working. We were the first technology incubator in Australia. We're almost 10 years old now. Our work came out of risking our own money to make brand new things. So all of our work is around starting off with an idea, something that's just pure thin air and what we think might be valuable one day, and transforming that into something which is a real business. This is very, very risky. More than 95% of companies fail when they try this. In fact, most companies, some recent data suggests, don't make it through their first year of developing a new idea. Now, when we start companies, we put $200,000 into starting these companies of our own money, and this is very risky if 95% of those opportunities are all going to go down the gurgler. So some of this work that I'm going to talk to you about is work which we've had to develop over the next 10 years in order to survive and remove that risk, and I think some of these things are quite helpful for what you're doing, and certainly the work that we're doing is we run, for example, CSIRO's accelerator. We help Telstra bring some of their biggest products to market. We work with the banks. We work with dairy companies. This is not just the domain of technology now. This is the new speed, the new velocity that we all need to get comfortable with. So let's talk about that speed and talk about some of the things that are changing just from our perspective as humans. So never mind our work in the energy business, our experience of work. What about life? Lots have changed in the last 5 years. How we read has changed. How we watch TV has dramatically changed. How we buy things has changed. How we travel has changed. I was talking to someone the other day about how in Sydney now, and I don't know if you experience it here, but actually I find myself driving different routes now around Sydney. All these different rat runs, which used to be quiet little streets. And now I am in a big, big queue of other cars going down this other track. What's happening? Well, we're all following Google Maps, and Google's telling us which way to go. No longer do we sort of feel our way through. So how we work is massively changing. How we talk to each other is changing. And this is creating massive volatility and almost disposability, not just of products, but of whole businesses themselves. What you're looking at here is a media example. This is Fairfax. And what happened when just 2 startups came along, Seek and Car Sales. At the beginning of this 3-year journey, Fairfax was worth about $7.5 billion. By the end of this journey, it was worth about $1 billion. It had just been absolutely obliterated and replaced by 2 other startups, which arguably did parts of its classified business better than Fairfax did. And they're not, of course, the only 2 companies that have replaced some of Fairfax's business model. There are literally hundreds of companies that do what Fairfax used to do monolithically better than Fairfax. So the size of the market is actually significantly bigger, but Fairfax doesn't own it anymore. These things are changing very, very quickly. Here's one of the things that's happening. In startups, we call it unbundling. And what you can see here is Wells Fargo Bank web page. But all the arrows and logos are pointing to different elements of the Wells Fargo business and showing you startups which are appearing, which do those elements of the banking business better than Wells Fargo did. And today, as consumers, we can string all those things together and make an altogether better experience. So banks are being unbundled and startups can do it. You don't have to be a big player anymore to do that. Here's FedEx as an example. Same thing, massive unbundling, startups doing it better, size of the market bigger, but fragmented across lots of different startups. This is causing the disruptive waves to get faster and faster, and each time they get bigger and bigger. Music, for example, just as one example, has just, there were literally centuries of live, and then decades of radio, and then less decades of vinyl, and then CDs less. And then when iTunes came along, we thought that was it. There's digital music at last. But people stopped using it really quickly and got into streaming services. So we're kind of disposable now with our products. We kick the tires, we move on to the next thing, and the next thing's always bigger, and it's always here 6 months after the thing we just tried last. Same with television. Television, I don't even know what that's going to become. Actually, when you're doing the disruptive cycles for this, it all just kind of pixelates and falls to pieces at the end because we just don't know how we're going to be watching television. Who's got kids in the room? And how much do they watch Channel 7? Not very much, right? But it used to be the thing. We all used to watch TV together around the television. But my kids, I don't think if you said Channel 7 to them, they wouldn't even know what you were talking about. It's utterly irrelevant to them. Minecraft videos on YouTube is all they care about. So, and what is a media company? This is a business called Upworthy. It appeared out of thin air. In 2 years, it had 88 million customers. But this business might not be around for much longer. It came quickly because of all the changes that are happening in terms of how people are consuming new products, especially media products. And it could easily go away again very, very quickly as we move on to the next idea. So here's another very, very frightening and exciting slide for you. This is from the GSMA, and it's showing you about the adoption of smartphones, right? So we're in the energy business. We're not in the telco business, but smartphones matter for what you're doing because smartphones are driving technical change and they're driving what our customers expect us to deliver in terms of value. What this slide shows you is the difference between the two colors is how many people are here today and how many people will have smartphones, in this case, in 2020, right? So basically, the other half of the world are going to come in the next few years. This is like a massive, influx of new customers that are available to us. And you might be thinking, we're Horizon, we're a West Australian energy company. Well, the products we're making with Horizon are absolutely global businesses. There's nothing that landlocks them to this place. They could be absolutely global and relevant to the entire energy business of the world. And these customers could be ours, right? These people are coming fast and they're coming strong and they've got powerful computers in their pockets. They've got high expectations. There's 4 billion of them. Their phones know where they are. They can sense the weather outside. They can sense the whole space around them. They're connected to the biggest databases in the world. The thing I want you to have in your mind here is that their expectations because of this are very, very high. They interact with their world. They interact with their world with very, very powerful capabilities that they have in their pockets, and these capabilities are becoming normal, and they expect us to make products which exploit every drop of power. This is my favorite chart, which is, it's showing you the beautiful adoption life cycle that we all learn at business school and how that's changing and being compressed. We're used to having these decade-long cycles where we prototype an idea, we get it out to market, and over time, we get more and more people adopting the technology, and eventually it slides away. In fact, arguably, you guys are in a very, very, or have been in a very, very uncomfortable place where everyone needs energy, so they just buy energy. Right? There hasn't been so much of this adoption life cycle, but it's coming, right? We can all feel it. The bit that I think is really interesting here is that the people at the beginning, the new normal for customers, is the people at the beginning are collaborating with us to make these products. So it's not like the old days where we'd actually develop products in a lab in secrecy and then push them out with a big marketing campaign and everyone takes them. You know, certainly in startup land, we start working with customers in the first day. And they help us to create this impact that causes lots of people to value what we're making in the soonest possible time frame. More people can help those customers get what they want. And here's some of the trends. What these three bubbles are here is looking at what a Silicon Valley venture capital firm would typically be funding for their first major round, a Series A capital raising. And so in 2000, your typical Series A funded company had 100 staff, 1 million users at the time they were funded, and had raised $10 million already to get to that point. Today, the orders of magnitude have completely inverted. So just 10 people can get 10 million users with $1 million by the time they go to a venture capitalist and ask for money. And then extreme examples like this one with Yo. Has anyone here used the incredible app called Yo? No? Do you want me to tell you what it does? So Yo is a social network which allows you to send Yo to everyone in your network. So it's arguably not very useful, but it certainly got the world's attention. One person got 1 million users with no money. And it just shows you what's possible. And now this person has a company that he's building actual real utility around. So the takeout here is it's everybody's game. Like everybody's here, everyone's making incredibly valuable products for consumers as these big business models are getting unbundled. We all think of human progress like this, but this is what's actually happening. It's an exponential rate of change and development. And this is what even scares me. I'm in the change business. I'm in the disruption business. This is what I do every day, and it should be normal, but it scares the shit out of me, right? Because this is super fast. So how do we possibly keep up with this? How do we plan? How do we strategize? You know, to give you a sense of what that means, we were talking about computers before and how fast they're changing. Well, today, we've all got a mouse's brain in our pocket for $1,000. In fact, we recently set up the first incubator in Burma where all this is subsidized. So in fact, everyone in Burma went from nobody having a smartphone to 20 million people having a smartphone in 6 months that they all paid $10 for. So it's as powerful as a mouse's brain. And remember, they were thousands of times less powerful just 3 years ago, right? By 2025, those consumers who have high expectations of us and the products we make are going to be carrying a computer, the equivalent of a human brain, in their pocket if the rate of change carries on happening, right? This is phenomenal. What those things will be able to do and what we will be able to do as an energy company when this is possible, not just because our consumers will have human brains in their pocket, but what our systems will be able to do, right? They'll be even more powerful. So we'll be able to do incredible things with energy, and our customers will be able to participate with us in being a prosumer, as Steve was saying, in our market. Finally, this is another sort of visualization of that rate of change. If you fill up Lake Michigan at the rate of technology change, this is what it looks like. And in fact, sorry, you won't see it because it's a PDF. But basically what happens is nothing happens from 1940 until about this year, and then it instantly fills up. It goes incredibly fast. And so we need to find some way of keeping up with those consumers. That was technology catching up with me. That was my insulin pump telling me I needed to calibrate myself. So there you go. There's the modern world for you happening right here on stage right now. So now it's going to get even faster. And what's really exciting for us at Horizon is here's one of the places where it's all going to happen, because all those other things that I was talking about, these are websites, these are marketplaces, these are media things, way of enjoying ourselves, way of buying things, right? But now the big things are going to change. So how we travel, we heard about electric cars, how energy works. I mean, that's amazing. How energy actually works and how people consume it, that is exciting. How our bodies work, that's what just beeped in my pocket. What money is going to change. And so it's happening really fast, and it means we have to work differently in some things. You know, we're always going to have an area of our work which is the sustaining stuff, the stuff we have to incrementally improve, get better, to optimize. But then there's another bunch of things which we have to pull out of thin air, and we have to materialize them and make them valuable as fast as we possibly can. And we have to be ahead of the curve of consumers. And this is what startups do. They learn like crazy, and speed is their normal state. So can anyone recognize this movie? It's The Social Network. It's the movie all about Facebook. And this is a scene where Mark Zuckerberg gets dumped by his girlfriend. And it's the single worst movie for understanding what happens in startups, because it says this is the pattern for new venture creation. 7 o'clock you get dumped, 8 o'clock you start coding, at 9 o'clock you launch what you've just coded, at midnight it goes viral, and before you know it, you're on University Avenue in Palo Alto meeting with Peter Thiel talking about the listing that's inevitably going to come up. Of course, it doesn't work that way. There is a deliberate mechanism, there's a process, there's a way of working which actually helps us turn an idea into something like Facebook. So here's an idea that I'd like to really emphasize to you guys. A startup is not a small version of a big company. And what that means is it's not the same as Horizon, but with less employees, less resources, less access to customers. It's an entirely different kind of organization which has a different purpose. And its purpose is to search. And this is why the theme of my talk here is learning velocity, the urgent need to be a learning organization in order to survive in this world. Startups, and I use that term generically to mean it could be a department in Horizon that's making something new that no one's seen before. They need to learn fast, and they need to learn as fast as they can. And being a startup means that your primary job is searching. It means your primary job is to learn about what people find valuable, who those people are, etc. Only when we've got all this in the bag can we turn ourselves into what we would generally call a company that operates, that runs systematically the same things in a bigger and bigger and more efficient way. Dave McClure, who is a Silicon Valley-based VC, puts it this way, a little bit more simply. A startup is a company that's confused about what its product is, who its customers are, and how it makes money. So I stand before you now as a founder coming to the Horizon board and saying, look, guys, I've got a great idea. I think it's going to work, but actually I don't really know what the product's going to look like in the end. I haven't quite figured out who the target segment is, who the customers are, and I don't really know how much money we're going to make, but what do you think? Can you back me? So that's a question you have to become comfortable with, right? And it's not to say you have to be reckless. There are ways, which I'll show you some of them, about how to think about this, how to manage the risk. But all the great ideas that are coming out of this disruptive wave now are coming out of uncertainty, out of a cloud of uncertainty, and many of them people think are stupid when they first come out, right? So we need to get comfortable with this. Now, in this world, the waterfall way of working is seductive, and I still do it after all these years, even though startup is in my blood. Why is it seductive? Because it feels like this is how we remove all the risk. We gather all the requirements, we make a very, very long list. Then we design something that perfectly addresses all those requirements. Then we build exactly what was specified. Then we launch something, and then we just maintain it, and magically we have a business. Now, arguably, actually, this can work for some businesses. If you're Telstra launching a new mobile phone plan, you can probably do this and pretty much predict what's going to happen because you know that business so well. You're a company, you're not a startup. If you're trying to come up with a new way of consumers distributing energy to each other in a microgrid, I don't know what's going to happen there, and I don't think anyone in this room knows truly. We have to find out, right? So this is risky. If something is wrong, the cascade towards big failure falls all the way through to the bottom. And this is what we want to avoid. This is what startups actually just can't do because they're never funded. They can't ask someone for millions of dollars and then build something and maybe it'll all fail at the end. They have to prove themselves all the way along, and so they've had to find ways of delivering the evidence as we go. So startups learn quickly, and they do it like this. The true product of an entrepreneur isn't the solution, but a working business model, right? So it's not the technology, it's not the hardware, it's not the thing in a box, it's not the material, it's the whole business model around it that we have to de-risk. And the real job of the entrepreneur is to systematically de-risk that business model over time. So what does that mean? When we first have an idea, hey, wouldn't it be cool if consumers all over Western Australia are trading energy with each other? That is 100% risk right there in that moment, because it's just something that we think would be valuable, but we don't actually have any evidence yet that it will be, right? So we have to start running experiments, going through a process to actually prove that each element of that business model is right, and as we do, the risk starts to fall away and we can invest deeper and deeper into it. And this is how startups do it, systematic learning. We do this. Instead of that waterfall process, we do build, measure, learn iterations as many times as we can in a single day. And this is what we call learning velocity, going around this circle as fast and deliberately as we can. What happens when you've had an idea? What's the next thing that happens if we're going clockwise? We build something, right? Think about your work and how uncomfortable that would be, right? It's hard, right? And it's to say, well, what can we build to actually test to see whether I'm right? That's the first instinct of a startup. The first instinct of a big company is to think about it some more, consult, come up with some plans, right? But if we build something that gives us some user engagement, some interaction that we can measure, and then we can learn from that and we can just go around this cycle many, many times. And Eric Ries, who's one of the big thinkers on this, says startups that succeed are those that iterate enough times before they run out of resources, right? And that just means they've just learned enough to show evidence for other people to give the next battery of resources to take the business forward. So all the time what we're doing is we're balancing intuition and evidence, right? The intuition's the fire in the belly, the passion, what in Pollenizer we call the unreasonable belief of a new idea. And we're balancing that with the evidence that's coming from experiments of actually running things with customers. This is what big companies usually do. They have an idea and then they execute. They have an idea, they plan it, they build it, and then push it to the market. Notice though it says it goes from 1 to 5. This is how we think about it, and this is what we've found really works in our way of operating. And this is the risk mitigation approach that we take. So having got an idea, we go through a series of stages in the middle before we execute at scale, and customers are involved all the way along these stages. So the people that attended the micro hack that we did with Horizon will know in the first day we were out with customers. We were talking to customers. We were actually getting customers to work with products that we've made. In the first stage, we're proving that there's a problem that we can solve. The customers acknowledge the problem and that we're seeing that they're having the problem solved. Probably the product, the thing that we've built, is very simple. It's raw. It's manually fed to make the whole thing work, but it gives the customer the experience and we can measure what happens. Then we prove the market. We do product market fit. We prove there's a whole business model around it, and only then do we maximize it so that it's fully scalable. It's going to make the most amount of money and be automated and distributable at the most efficient rate, and then we execute. And as we go through this, We're decreasing the risk, and we can invest more because we know what we're investing in. We've got the confidence that what we think is going to happen will happen. And arguably, by the time you get to this point, you should literally know if you drop $1 in, $100 or whatever it is comes out the other end because you know the mechanics of the business, but you've incrementally stepped your way through, learning as fast as you can on the way. And this is what startups do. They step through these stages, and they're pretty well understood in the startup world. It's so much so there's been some research around it, which came out of Stanford and a project called the Startup Genome Project. And it got some evidence from what is now more than 30,000 startups all over the world. And they discovered that the most common cause of failure is self-destruction through premature scaling. And basically what that means is the founders chose to skip one or all of these stages. So just go straight to scale, or not try and maximize the efficiency ready for scale, or not prove at the front, it's scary, that there's no actual problem to be solved. And then they build a building on fragile foundations, and the whole thing just doesn't quite make it. And so here's some of the evidence that came out of it. You're looking here at 2 lines, and the company's going through the different stages of the life cycle. They call it something slightly different. And you can see the ones that prematurely scaled just can't quite get above they're kind of forcing this 10% growth rate month on month, and they just can't get bigger. And this is because they're doing a lot of hard work. They're forcing marketing campaigns. They're forcing customers into the top of the funnel, but they can't keep them, so it's not growing. Whereas the companies that really prove that they can solve a problem, build a business model around it, make it scalable, they just go up and up and up. And this is, you can see the scale there on the side. They're growing at 1,000% by the time they get further along. Also, the ones that prematurely scaled hardly any of them got to make more than $100,000 a month. So these are weak, small businesses. These are not great businesses. They're forcing themselves through, and they just don't make it. And here's some examples of companies that have done this. They've prematurely scaled. They haven't learned. They've just done it all on a plan and throw money at it and hope that it works. Webvan is a very famous one. These guys were around at the beginning of the .com, right? It was a very famous case study. The important point I want you to think about is, on paper, this is an amazing plan. It makes perfect intuitive sense. People are going to start buying things from their browser, through their browser. Of course, we need to be the company which is going to facilitate the delivery of the goods from the warehouse to wherever that browser is, right? Somebody needs to do that. It's going to be us. We're going to have first mover advantage. But within 2 years, even with an incredible team around them, and $800 million 20 years ago, it all went down the toilet, right? The business was finished. And it's because they didn't learn about all the different elements of the business model that they need to get right. What are they selling? Who are they selling it to? Which areas do they begin with? What channels do they reach the customers? And one obvious thing here is, let's just contrast Webvan with a company that was similar, that started at the same time. Webvan sold groceries. This is not necessarily the sensible first place to start if you're in the delivery business, because groceries aren't stackable. They spoil very quickly. They need to be refrigerated in many cases. They're very, very complicated. The other company would be Amazon, right? Arguably the same thing. It's still the global delivery business of the planet. But they start off with books, which never spoil. You can stack them up. You can fit just millions of them in warehouses. Here's another one called Color. Same thing. Entrepreneur got lots and lots of money because he's been successful so many times. They made a product here which was a better version of Instagram, if you like, with some really sexy technology in it. So what you can see here is a montage of people from the same event. So what it did is it made an ad hoc network for everyone. So we could all take pictures in this room right now with color, and the montage would show all our different perspectives of the same thing that we're taking. But who wants that? What's its purpose? What problem is it solving, right? It's like they didn't know the answer to that question. They prematurely scaled. They didn't even ask proof of problem, right? And what happened is, because of the fame of this guy, it spiked and then it fell away instantaneously. Like everyone used it once, like literally millions of people used it once and never came back. So startups that grow consistently and don't prematurely scale, here's what happens to them. This is what you can see there is their valuations, which just go exponential. And they grow, and the valuation's exponential because they're growing 20 times faster on average. It makes sense. You've solved a problem, you've built a business model around it, you've made it highly scalable. Here's some of the things enterprises do to force premature scaling and therefore increase the chance of failure. So we resist change after the initial plan, right? And all these happen for good reason, right? Because if someone comes to you as a board and says, I need $5 million of CapEx to build this asset, you need them to go and build that asset then, right? But that, when you're making something disruptive, that big leap of risk causes failure if we're making something disruptive and new. We urge the startups to grow too quickly. So again, we say we've given you all this money, we need to get a return. We're too good at execution, so we jump to that. So we'll put a team of 25 people on it who are all expert in their different areas. And now that team spends the next year of their life trying to get consensus with each other instead of plowing forward. So remember, I'm talking about new ideas here specifically. I'm not saying it's bad to have teams of 25. I'm saying if you're making something new, how do you allow it to change? How do you make the team small so that they can just make very, very quick decisions together? And similar one, we focus on revenue, which gets the whole team. We see this in our work all the time. Deep down, everyone's kind of just doing the customer discovery stuff just to sort of go through the motions, but they know their boss wants them to deliver $25 million by the end of the financial year, and that's actually what's going on. And so they build a weak business while they're having that thought. So these are very important board matters from my perspective. This is how we see boards stopping new innovation happening accidentally by putting great governance around a big business. What you can see here is learning velocity that we track. And you can see a whole bunch of different cohorts happening. And we track it as a sort of normal rate. We try and establish a norm. And we say, let's just keep all the teams' learning velocity up. Remember I showed you the build, measure, learn loop? That's sort of one journey around getting a point for learning velocity. And what you can see here is the Horizon teams starting their journey, this little line. Just getting started. So I like that. They're on track for being phenomenal learners. They're doing really well. So we need to develop and encourage a learning mindset which is curious and feels an urgent need to discover value. So I was thinking about how I think as an entrepreneur and how the people around me think. So first thing is I pursue impact. I have to have impact from what I do. I'm not interested in incremental change. I'm interested in something that's 10x. Otherwise, why get out of bed? I like to have something at stake. So I like to have a risk. I like to have a consequence if I fail on my mission. And I like to have a reward if I'm successful. Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, the first and biggest incubator in the world, made the observation that of all the successful teams like Dropbox and so on that have come out of Y Combinator, one of the patterns is the founders are people that have put their reputation on the line and they have to deliver, right? They have said they're going to do it, they have to do it. One of the things we look for in Pollenizer when we're trying to find founders is people with an unreasonable belief, we call it. People who there's a new idea, who knows if it's going to work, but you can see in their eyes that they're going to pull it off. And we were talking the other night about some of the founders that we've got building next generation Horizon businesses, and they've got this eye of the tiger, right? They're coming in and they are determined to find this new business model that we're trying to make. I always need to be moving forward because I know that traction is the only metric. People really, really want to know that this is moving forward, that we're finding value, that it's getting better every single day. And here's an interesting one. I need the ability to change things tomorrow. Because the business model's changing, because it's volatile, because it's highly uncertain, we may get to the end of this afternoon and realize all these assumptions we've made are actually not true, right? So now what happens? Like, how do we govern things so that the person that we've made accountable for making that value happen can decide to do something different tomorrow morning and go and make it valuable, force the value to happen? This is what entrepreneurs do. And, you know, again, don't think about your big infrastructure investments and the sustaining innovation that you do. Think about the things that you're spending a small amount of money on, that you're investigating, you're discovering, you're trying to find out if something is valuable. How do you allow those people to make a change, right? That without needing to get consensus in a big group of people to agree. This is Harvard Business Review's definition of entrepreneurship, which I think is interesting. It's not just about making businesses, it's the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. So again, it's not about, thinking about beyond resources controlled. We're not saying what you need to get this done. We're saying here's all you've got, make something valuable. It's different. And one of the ways of looking, I remember Mike Cannon-Brookes, the founder of Atlassian, gave me this white paper when I started Pollenizer 10 years ago. And it really got me thinking. And these are the diagrams in it. It says this is what a manager does, right? You've got a given set of means, your assets, your resources, and you have to go and get that done. Here's your goal, spend those resources, get that done, right? If you're a strategic manager, you do this. So you've got a given set of means, but also it's like, come up with some other means if you want. If you can find a better way, do that, but there's your goal. Go and get that done, right? This is, but what happens if this bit is wrong, right? The whole thing falls over. If we're saying get that done, and here's your means, and then there's something wrong here, then the failure happens. We've baked it in to the decision-making process and the governance. What entrepreneurs do is this. Here's some given resources. Here's a given set of means. They're fixed. They don't change. Go and create an end of your choice, but just make sure it's valuable, right? Which is entirely different. We don't care so much exactly what the end is. We just want it to be the most valuable thing you can make, and here's the resources that you've got. So the way we do things in Pollenizer is like this. This is our typical model, and it's very like what the two Horizon teams are doing, where the resources are fixed, right? There are 3 lots of 3 months. This is the initial commitment with gates to get through. Not like stage gates like a big infrastructure play, but like just milestones that we have to get through. 3 people maximum, usually it's 2. And then $200,000 and nothing else. That's what you've got. So you've got 9 months, $200,000, 2 people to make the most valuable thing you can, even though you don't really know who your customer is, what your product is, and how you're going to make money, right? So, but that forces the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. It causes action, it causes traction, it causes entrepreneurship to happen. So if on the other hand you say to a team, how many people do you need? How much money do you want to do a most amazing job? You're not creating the conditions of entrepreneurship. You're creating too much flexibility around it. So remember, here's that quote again. Startups that succeed are those that iterate enough times before running out of resources, before getting to the end of these stages. Another way of putting it, this is my favorite entrepreneurship definition. Entrepreneurship's like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down, right? We build the right things in the right order. We build the wings first to make sure bad things don't happen by the time we hit the ground. And it's just the perfect description of the feeling that we want to try and create around a new venture experience. And Seth Godin describes this as emotional labor, which I really like, right? So how can we create passion, fear, in a good way, right? Excitement around this new idea when it's somebody's job, when it's someone's mission to make a valuable thing out of thin air. How do we make them feel like this? Because this is the more scalable solution. This is the stuff that makes people just think about it and do what needs to be done to get it there. This is Biz Stone, one of the founders of Twitter, and he says, a personal belief is that if you're not personally invested in what you're working on, you'll fail. So remember, this is still new venture, making something come out of thin air into something material. It's hard. Like the laws of physics say it should fail, like the world conspires to stop it being successful. It's just stubborn entrepreneurs, stubborn people that get it through, and actually being vested in it gets us through. And that's not necessarily just money. It might be just emotion, it might be ownership, it might be ability to make decisions. So here's the final thought to leave you with. We've got 2 companies now that we're developing, 2 new ideas that may be important parts of Horizon's future. And we've got so many things to find out. Nexergy is one of the teams, and they're figuring out ways of actually trading energy between different households on a microgrid. So what's going to motivate the people to trade that energy? Like, why will someone decide to do it? Why do they care? What's the problem that we're solving? We need to find that out. How do we make it simple? How do we make complicated energy something that somebody in a house can understand? Citizen utility, we spent some time on this yesterday. This is all about motivating communities to actually take control and manage their own energy. We talked about prosumers again. So how do we motivate whole communities to do that? Why will a remote indigenous community say, hey, I'm definitely going to start managing my energy today for the benefit of this community? What causes that to happen? What are the mechanics? What motivates them? What does the app do? If there is an app, who manages the infrastructure? How much of the utility company, how much of what we do as Horizon can we push to the edge? And there's 1,000 other questions under each one. So my closing thoughts to you guys as leaders and as board members of Horizon is, you need to ask the question, what have you learned? Tell me what you've learned. What do you know today that you didn't know tomorrow? What do we need to understand? What do we need to go and find out now? Ask those questions for your new ventures, and you're going to invent some remarkable new businesses that you had no idea were out there. And I can't wait to be on the journey with you. So thanks for your time.